The city never becomes quieter. It only becomes louder inside your head. Messages arrive faster than your thoughts can settle. Opinions collide endlessly. Someone misunderstands you. Someone challenges you. Someone ignores you. Someone provokes you just enough to make your blood rise, and almost without thinking, your hand reaches for the phone. You begin typing, a defense, an explanation, a reaction, not because it will change anything, but because somewhere deep inside you, there is still a part that fears silence, a part that believes your worth must be defended immediately, a part that cannot tolerate being misunderstood, a part that feels weak when it is unseen. So you respond, again and again, until your peace slowly begins belonging to other people. You start waking up emotionally exhausted before the day even begins. Your mind rehearses conversations that no longer matter. Arguments replay themselves in the dark, like ghosts pacing an empty hallway. You imagine what you should have said, what you could have said, what you will say next time. And without realizing it, your life becomes governed by reaction, not intention. Reaction. This is how many men lose themselves now. Not through catastrophe, not through war, not through famine, but through endless emotional leakage, tiny reactions, tiny frustrations, tiny validations, day after day. The ancient Stoics understood something most modern people never truly learn. Whoever controls your reactions controls you. Marcus Aurelius wrote quietly in the darkness of Roman nights while empires trembled around him. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But most people never realize it. Because reacting feels powerful in the moment. Silence feels unbearable, especially when your heart is heavy, especially when rejection stings, especially when disrespect burns inside your chest like fire searching for air. You want them to know your side. You want them to understand your pain. You want justice. You want recognition. You want relief. But relief rarely comes through reaction. Most reactions only deepen the wound. And the strange truth is this: the more emotionally reactive a person becomes, the weaker they appear. Not because emotion itself is weakness, but because uncontrolled emotion makes you predictable. Predictable people are easy to manipulate, easy to provoke, easy to drain. The calm man becomes dangerous because nobody can steer him emotionally. His silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty creates power. Years ago, a young man walked into a crowded room carrying invisible storms inside him. You would not have noticed it immediately. From the outside, he looked composed enough, strong enough, disciplined enough. But internally, he was at war with nearly everything. He checked his phone constantly, measured his value through responses, felt restless when ignored, felt wounded by criticism, felt compelled to explain himself to everyone around him. If someone insulted him, he reacted. If someone doubted him, he defended himself. If someone withdrew affection, panic quietly entered his chest. He did not understand why he felt emotionally exhausted all the time. Only later would he realize his energy was being stolen by unnecessary reactions. The world had trained him to respond instantly to everything, every opinion, every provocation, every emotional hook. And modern life rewards this weakness. Algorithms reward outrage. People reward drama. Entire social circles survive through emotional chaos. Few people remain calm anymore. Few people can sit quietly with misunderstanding. Few people can tolerate silence without rushing to fill it. But silence reveals character. Anyone can speak. Anyone can argue. Anyone can defend themselves endlessly. But restraint restraint is rare. The Stoics believed discipline begins first in the invisible world, before actions, before words, inside thought itself, because the mind becomes whatever it repeatedly practices. If you constantly practice outrage, you become anger. If you constantly practice fear, you become anxiety. If you constantly practice reaction, you become emotionally fragile, and eventually your peace depends entirely on external behavior. One message can ruin your morning. One comment can destroy your confidence. One rejection can consume your entire week. This is not strength. It is emotional dependence disguised as passion. The young man did not understand this yet. He believed reacting proved confidence. He believed explaining himself would earn respect. He believed being understood would finally bring peace. But peace built upon validation always collapses, because people are unpredictable. Some misunderstand intentionally. Some provoke for entertainment. Some project their own unhappiness onto others because suffering seeks company. And if you react emotionally to every person you encounter, you eventually become scattered, drained, restless, unable to hear your own mind clearly anymore. One evening, after another pointless argument that lingered inside him long after it ended, the young man sat alone beneath cold rain outside his apartment building. The city lights reflected across wet pavement. Cars passed slowly through the dark like silent machines carrying strangers toward temporary destinations. Everything felt heavy, not because of the argument itself, but because deep down he knew something terrifying. Nothing had changed. He had explained himself perfectly, and still nothing changed. The other person did not suddenly understand him. The pain did not disappear. The emptiness remained. He felt emotionally tired in a way sleep could not fix. And for the first time, he asked himself a question most people avoid their entire lives. Why do I feel so controlled by other people's behavior? That question changed everything, because honest questions open doors pride tries to keep shut. Most people never stop long enough to examine their reactions. They simply obey them. Anger arrives, they obey it. Fear arrives, they obey it. Validation disappears, they panic. Few people step back and observe themselves honestly, but observation is where transformation begins. Not judgment, observation. The Stoics practiced this relentlessly. They understood human beings are not destroyed by events themselves, but by the meaning they attach to them. A delayed text becomes rejection. Criticism becomes humiliation. Disagreement becomes personal attack. The mind exaggerates suffering constantly, and when you react immediately, you give temporary emotion permanent authority. This is why silence matters. Silence interrupts emotional momentum. It creates space between feeling and action, and inside that space, wisdom has room to breathe. The young man began experimenting with this slowly. At first it felt unbearable. When insulted, he wanted to defend himself instantly. When ignored, he wanted answers immediately. When misunderstood, he wanted to explain every detail. But instead, he paused, only for a few seconds at first, then minutes, then entire days. And something strange began happening. Many things that once felt catastrophic suddenly looked insignificant with time. The emotional intensity faded. The urgency disappeared. He realized most reactions are temporary storms, pretending to be permanent truths. And when you stop feeding them instantly, they weaken. This is why emotionally disciplined people appear powerful, not because they feel nothing, but because they are not enslaved by every feeling that appears. The ocean remains powerful precisely because it does not chase every wave. A mountain remains powerful precisely because storms cannot move it. And a disciplined mind remains powerful because not every emotion receives permission to speak. Modern culture rarely teaches this. Instead, people are taught to express every impulse immediately. Say exactly how you feel. React instantly. Release every emotion outward. But uncontrolled expression often creates deeper suffering. Because emotions are not always truth. Sometimes they are fear wearing different masks. Fear of abandonment, fear of insignificance, fear of rejection, fear of being forgotten, and fear blocks positive action. Fear narrows perspective until your entire world becomes one conversation, one person, one wound. The Stoics sought freedom through inner stability, not emotional suppression, stability. There is a difference. Suppression buries emotion alive. Stoicism observes emotion without becoming consumed by it. One evening, the young man received a message that would once have destroyed his peace entirely. Someone he deeply cared about had grown distant, cold, detached. Their words carried unfamiliar absence. In the past, he would have panicked immediately, sent paragraphs, demanded reassurance, tried desperately to repair what he feared losing. But something inside him had changed. Not completely, but enough. Instead of reacting instantly, he sat quietly beside the window as rain tapped softly against the glass. The room was dim except for distant city lights slipping through the darkness. His chest still hurt. His heart still felt heavy. But he did not run from the discomfort this time. He observed it. He allowed silence to exist. And within that silence, he realized something profound. Much of his suffering came not from losing people, but from abandoning himself, trying to keep them. That realization felt both painful and liberating, because many people spend years negotiating against their own peace for temporary affection. They tolerate disrespect, over-explain themselves, chase reassurance, sacrifice dignity for emotional survival, and eventually they become emotionally fragmented. Not because they loved too deeply, but because they depended too heavily. Stoicism does not teach you to stop loving. It teaches you not to disappear inside attachment, to enjoy everything that happens in your life without making your happiness dependent upon one person. This is difficult, especially in an age where loneliness abounds quietly beneath endless connection. People are surrounded constantly, yet internally isolated, always communicating, rarely understood, and when someone finally makes them feel seen, fear enters immediately, fear of losing the feeling. So they cling, they react, they over-explain, they over-pursue, not realizing desperation repels what peace attracts naturally. The young man began noticing something uncomfortable. The calmer he became, the more clearly he could see others. Not everyone deserved access to his energy. Not every disagreement deserved attention. Not every criticism deserved response. Not every invitation deserved acceptance. And slowly, he stopped trying to win every battle. Because mature strength understands some victories cost too much peace. This is why truly powerful people often appear quiet, not weak, quiet. They no longer feel compelled to prove themselves constantly. They understand truth survives without defense. The sun does not argue with blind men. It simply rises. There is enormous power in becoming emotionally difficult to disturb. Not cold, not cruel, stable. When someone insults you and receives no chaos in return, they become unsettled. When someone attempts manipulation and receives calm observation instead of emotional panic, their power weakens. This is why silence often speaks louder than explanation, because emotional restraint communicates self-respect, and self-respect changes everything. The Stoics frequently reflected on mortality for this reason, not to become hopeless, but to regain perspective. Most arguments lose importance when viewed beside death. Most ego battles suddenly appear absurd. One day, all explanations end. One day, every conversation becomes silence. So why waste precious years emotionally imprisoned by temporary people and temporary opinions? Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. This realization can feel frightening at first, but eventually it becomes freeing. Because it forces clarity. You stop asking, how do I make everyone understand me? And begin asking, what deserves my remaining energy? That question changes how you live. The young man began withdrawing from unnecessary conflict slowly, not dramatically, quietly. He no longer responded immediately to disrespect, no longer chased people emotionally, no longer argued endlessly online with strangers who only sought reaction. And strangely, his life became lighter, not perfect, but lighter. His mind grew quieter. His sleep improved, his thoughts became clearer. He discovered peace was not something given by others. It was something protected internally. Most people lose peace because they hand emotional access to everyone. But not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Some people only know how to create chaos because chaos is all they carry inside themselves. And if you absorb every storm around you, eventually you forget what calm even feels like. This is why solitude matters, not permanent isolation, but intentional distance from noise. Silence restores perspective. The ancient philosophers often walked alone for this reason. Mountains, gardens, stone corridors, quiet fires at night, not because they hated humanity, but because wisdom requires space. Modern life rarely leaves room for stillness anymore. People wake up and immediately enter noise, notifications, news, conflict, comparison. The nervous system never rests, and a restless mind becomes emotionally impulsive. This is why patience matters. Patience is not passive weakness. Patience is emotional discipline under pressure. Anyone can remain calm when life feels easy, but when rejection arrives, when betrayal appears, when disrespect cuts deeply, that is where character reveals itself. The young man still struggled sometimes. Some nights old habits returned. He wanted to explain himself, wanted closure, wanted reassurance. But over time, he learned an uncomfortable truth. Closure rarely arrives through another person. Most closure is self-created. You stop waiting. You stop chasing answers. You stop reopening wounds, hoping someone else will heal them. Healing begins the moment you stop negotiating against reality. Reality does not bend for emotional preference. People change. Love fades sometimes. Friendships dissolve. Misunderstandings happen. Life remains unpredictable, and suffering intensifies whenever you demand permanence from temporary things. The Stoics practiced acceptance not because they lacked emotion, but because they understood resistance creates additional pain. A storm hurts less when you stop screaming at the rain. The young man gradually became someone difficult to emotionally manipulate, not because he stopped caring, but because he learned to care without losing himself. That distinction matters. Detached people feel empty. Disciplined people feel deeply without surrendering control. There is enormous strength in remaining internally anchored while chaos unfolds externally. One afternoon, months later, He encountered someone who once held immense emotional power over him. In the past, even seeing their name would disturb his entire day. But now, something was different. No panic, no desperation, no internal collapse, just quiet awareness. He listened calmly, spoke calmly, left calmly, and afterward he realized the situation had not changed. He had. That is real power, not dominance over others, mastery over yourself. The world constantly teaches people to seek external power, status, attention, influence, validation. But none of those things create peace internally. Many admired people remain deeply miserable because their emotional state still depends entirely on external approval. Stoicism teaches another path, a quieter one, a stronger one, the path of internal authority, where your mood is no longer governed by every opinion, where silence no longer frightens you, where solitude becomes rest instead of punishment. This transformation does not happen overnight. You will fail sometimes. You will react emotionally again. You will say too much. You will seek reassurance from people incapable of giving it. That is part of being human. But each moment of awareness strengthens you. Each moment you pause instead of react builds discipline. Each moment you protect your peace instead of feeding chaos rebuilds your spirit slowly. And eventually people begin noticing something unusual about you. You seem calmer, more grounded, harder to provoke. Your presence changes, because emotional stability radiates outward. Most people are drowning internally. So when they encounter someone truly calm, it feels rare, powerful, almost unsettling. This is why silence often attracts attention more than explanation. Mystery commands curiosity. Over-explaining destroys mystery because it reveals insecurity. People who constantly explain themselves are usually seeking permission to feel worthy. But worthy people do not beg to be understood. They remain rooted regardless. The mountain does not shrink because someone misunderstands its height. The ocean does not panic because someone insults its depth. And you must stop abandoning your inner strength, trying to control external perception. Not everyone will understand you. Some people are committed to misunderstanding. Others only value you when you remain emotionally reactive because your instability benefits them. When you become calm, manipulators lose influence. This is why growth sometimes creates loneliness, not because peace is isolating, but because emotional maturity changes what you tolerate. You stop entertaining draining conversations, stop chasing unavailable people, stop participating in unnecessary emotional games, and some relationships fall away naturally. This can feel painful initially, especially if your identity depended upon being needed constantly. But solitude often precedes transformation. A forest grows quietly, mountains rise slowly, real strength develops away from applause. The young man began spending more time alone intentionally. Long walks at night, early mornings before the world awakened, moments without music, moments without distraction. At first, the silence felt uncomfortable. Then, healing began, because beneath endless reaction, he finally heard himself clearly again. His intuition returned, his instincts sharpened, his mind no longer felt constantly fragmented, and for the first time in years, he felt emotionally rested. Not because life became easier, but because he stopped turning every discomfort into internal warfare. This is one of the greatest Stoic lessons. Peace is not found by controlling the world. Peace is found by controlling your relationship to the world. That relationship changes everything. A difficult conversation no longer destroys your week. An insult no longer defines your identity. A rejection no longer ruins your self-worth, because your foundation no longer depends upon unstable things. You begin living from internal strength rather than emotional hunger. And emotional hunger creates reckless behavior. People chase validation desperately when they feel empty internally. They overshare, overreact, overpursue, not because they are weak people, but because they fear being unseen. Yet paradoxically, the less desperate you become for attention, the more powerful your presence feels. Stillness commands respect. Calmness commands attention. Silence commands curiosity. There is an old truth many never understand until suffering teaches it personally. Your energy is sacred. Every reaction costs something. Every argument drains something. Every emotional spiral steals something. And eventually you must ask, what deserves access to my spirit? Because life is finite. Your attention is finite. Your emotional energy is finite. Stop spending it on temporary chaos. The Stoics were not emotionless statues. They were deeply aware human beings who understood discipline protects peace. They loved, they grieved, they suffered, but they refused to become slaves to every emotional wave. And that is the difference. Anyone can feel emotion. Wisdom lies in how you respond to it. The young man eventually understood something that once seemed impossible. Silence was never weakness. Silence was freedom. Not silence born from fear. Silence born from understanding. Understanding that not every battle deserves participation. Understanding that emotional restraint creates clarity. Understanding that inner peace is too valuable to trade for temporary validation. One winter evening, he stood alone overlooking the city from a quiet hill as snow drifted slowly through the dark. The world below continued endlessly, lights flashing, people arguing, phones vibrating, voices competing for attention. But for the first time in a long while, his mind felt still, not empty, still. And in that stillness, he finally understood what the Stoics had tried teaching for centuries. Power is not loud. Real power does not scream for recognition. It does not chase validation. It does not explain itself endlessly. Real power remains composed while chaos demands reaction. Real power chooses peace, even when pride wants war. Real power walks away from emotional traps without needing the final word. Because the strongest mind in the room is often the calmest one. Not the loudest, not the most aggressive, the calmest. A person who cannot be emotionally controlled becomes incredibly difficult to defeat. Because their peace no longer depends upon external outcomes. And perhaps that is what freedom truly means. Not controlling life, but no longer being controlled by every emotion life creates inside you. The storms may still come, loss will still happen, rejection will still hurt, loneliness will still visit sometimes. You are human, but suffering no longer consumes your identity entirely. You learn to sit with discomfort without collapsing into it. You learn patience, tolerance, perspective. You learn to let silence speak where ego once demanded explanation. And eventually your entire presence changes. People sense it immediately, not because you became cold, but because you became grounded, centered, whole. There is something deeply powerful about a person who no longer needs to react to everything, a person who listens more than they speak, who observes more than they argue, who protects their peace without needing permission. That kind of person becomes unforgettable, because calmness is rare now. Most people are ruled by impulse, but disciplined silence. Disciplined silence feels ancient, timeless, like mountains watching storms pass without fear. And perhaps that is the lesson hidden beneath all Stoic philosophy. You do not become powerful by controlling others. You become powerful by finally controlling yourself. The less you respond, the more you begin hearing your own soul again. The less you chase, the more peace quietly returns. The less you explain, the more your actions begin speaking for you. And one day, without even realizing when it happened, you stop needing the world to constantly validate your existence. You simply exist, calmly, quietly, powerfully, like fire that no longer fears the dark.